Are you sure you want to take the shift on the 6th floor? I heard there's someone still alive who shouldn't be. St. Raphael Hospital was once known as a place that healed suffering souls. But on the 6th floor, especially at the far end of the East Corridor, people called it the cold zone of the undead. Every time she started a night shift, Zora Matthews heard those whispers. If not from doctors, then from other nurses. Even the security guards. They whispered as if speaking too loudly might awaken something that shouldn't exist. Room 607. The name didn't appear on any patient assignment chart. There was no nameplate on the door, only a red warning sign. Extreme isolation, do not enter without authorization. Zora was a 32-year-old black nurse, a face often overlooked in meetings but remembered most by patients after discharge. Because of her kind eyes, her gentle hands, the small stories she told while changing bandages or checking blood pressure. She didn't like the silence that came with rumors. She had lived long enough to understand one thing. When the world calls someone a monster, it's usually because they fear the light in that person is too bright. That was what her mother, an elderly nun from Mississippi, had taught her. That evening, the hallway on the 6th floor stretched endlessly, the flickering fluorescent lights blinking like they had just lost power and flicked back on. Zora walked forward, chart in hand. Her white nurse shoes made soft taps on the gleaming stone floor. On the form, the patient in room 607 had only 3 lines of information. Gender, male. Response to verbal stimuli, none. Danger level, high. She stopped in front of a dull silver-gray door with peeling edges and an old bloodstain bent like dried wine around the handle. Next to it, a hastily scribbled note read, "Do not enter. Dangerous." Zora took a light breath. Her eyes didn't blink as she read that line. Instead, her lips tightened slightly, just like when she decided to stand up to the racist nurses during her first shift. She put on her mask, gloves, and protective gown. Every motion was textbook precise, but in her heart beat something deeply human, the ache of knowing someone was being abandoned. She knocked 3 times. No answer. She cracked the door open. A cold draft seeped in like winter air through thin glass. Not a temperature cold, but the scent of loneliness sealed away. He was sitting there, not lying down, sitting upright on the hospital bed, propped by 2 pillows behind his back. His entire body wrapped in white bandages, only his eyes exposed. Deep black eyes, not empty, but as if they carried a dream long since burned. Zora stepped in, not too close, not too far. "Hello," she said, voice calm, warm and natural, like greeting an elderly patient waiting for his blood pressure pills. "I'm Zora. I'll be taking care of you today." No response. Just those eyes, staring, unblinking. Not with confusion, not with threat, but as if weighing whether they could trust her. Zora quietly checked the IV, adjusted the thermometer. Everything normal, but she didn't overlook a single detail. The skin on his neck, where it showed between the bandages, bore no signs of infection. His pulse was steady, blood pressure stable. He didn't look dangerous. He didn't look like someone near death. 20 minutes later, she stepped out of the room. The stares that followed her felt as if she had just embraced a cobra. "Are you insane? Aren't you afraid he'll bite?" He broke the jaw of the first doctor who examined him, you know. Zora silently removed her gloves, washed her hands as always. But inside, something had been sparked. She wasn't afraid. She wanted to know who that man was, and why everyone was so afraid of him. Not everyone who stays silent does so because they have nothing to say. Some choose silence because if they were to speak, the world would tremble. The next day, Zora took the night shift again. She walked straight to the 6th floor without hesitation. A few nurses glanced at her, and one even whispered, "She's probably under a spell. Maybe it's voodoo or something." Zora didn't respond. She was far too used to baseless judgments. What she trusted was always the look in someone's eyes, not rumors. Room 607 remained silent, as if time had frozen inside. Zora walked in without knocking this time. She brought a warm towel and a small bag of unscented lotion, knowing that patients who lay still for long periods were prone to dry skin and pressure ulcers. He was still sitting as he had the day before. No movement, no words. Only his eyes were alive. Not fierce, not cold, just quietly observant, as though relearning how to exist among humans. Zora spoke while working, not paying attention to whom she was talking to. You know, today was rough. A carotid artery rupture from a car crash. And the new doctor? Totally wired from too much coffee? No reaction. Zora chuckled softly. That's okay. I'm guessing you're not much of a talker anyway. She gently applied lotion to the exposed skin on his neck and hands, the parts not wrapped in bandages. His skin was dry but clean, showing no signs of infection. It was a healthy brown tone, not the skin of someone homeless or living rough. One detail made Zora pause. His hands. Not rough, not scraped. Long fingers. Nails neatly trimmed. These were not the hands of someone who had punched a doctor. These were the hands of someone who had once touched delicate things. An artist, perhaps? Zora pretended not to notice, but inside, she began connecting the dots. She placed a small, old music player on the table near his bed, something she always brought on night shifts to soothe delirious patients. A soft track played, smooth R and B, piano notes whispering like wind. Suddenly, the man's hand twitched slightly, like a reflex. His eyes moved toward the speaker. Not out of curiosity, more like recognition. Zora said nothing, but she saw it. She felt it. Before leaving, she left a small note on the tray at his bedside. I don't need to know your name. Just know, if you need anything, I'll be here. Not out of curiosity, out of kindness. The next morning when she returned, the note was still there, but something was different. A single word had been scribbled faintly in ballpoint pen along the edge of the paper. Thank you. Zora stood still. That was the first word he had spoken, though not aloud, but it was enough to build a bridge. And she knew. Someone was beginning to trust. What Zora didn't yet know was that the bridge she had just built would lead straight into a world of darkness, brilliance, and crime. The dead don't sing. But that night, a song echoed from the realm of the forgotten. On the third night, Zora brought with her a container of hot soup, a new blanket, and something special. An old hand-labeled CD titled Mixtape 2018, Summer Nights. The hospital felt gloomier than usual. One hypertensive patient had died of a stroke, and a resident doctor nearly fainted after 3 consecutive surgeries. Exhaustion, chaos, and a cold atmosphere filled the air. When Zora entered room 607, it was like stepping into another world, a world so silent she could hear her own breathing. The man, still silent, still untouched by food, but his eyes, they kept watching. Every day there was just a little more life in them, just a little. Tonight I brought you music, Zora said, placing a small CD player on the bedside table. This kind of music once helped me get through heartbreak. She didn't expect a response. She pressed play. The first track played, a slow, sorrowful R&B song filled with the sound of wind, soft sighs in every beat. The music floated like mist in the air. And then it happened. A faint sound, a voice. He was singing along. Zora froze. Just one line, not clear, not complete, but on pitch. That voice, warm, thick, smooth like velvet, was unmistakable. Zora had heard that voice 100 times before, in her bedroom, through headphones, on the radio, on the bus. I've been down this road before, but tonight it feels like home. That voice belonged to Jalen Cross. Zora stood still. Her heart pounded. Jalen Cross, the R&B star who once ruled the charts, the man who had mysteriously disappeared in a boating accident in St. Lucia 9 months ago. No body was found. Only a recovered jacket and a final verdict. Deceased. You, Zora whispered, barely audible. You know this song? The man looked at her, a moment of hesitation, then a nod. Slight, slow, a nod. Zora sat down, her heartbeat skipping. I used to be a fan of Jalen. Actually, I still am. That song, he wrote it after a breakup, but he never performed it live. Only released an acoustic version online. Not many people know that. How do you know it? Silence. Zora lowered her head and pulled out an old photo from her pocket, the poster of Jalen's last tour. She had kept it since college. Jalen is the one who sang this. No one else sounds like him. The man didn't answer, but his eyes, those deep, silent eyes, like oceans that had weathered too many storms. In that moment, something broke open. No denial, no confirmation, just acknowledgement through silence. Zora looked at him as if trying to tell real from illusion. She didn't ask more, didn't push. But inside her, a storm was beginning to form. If that's Jalen Cross, then why is he here? And who wanted the whole world to believe he was dead? At the end of her shift, as Zora turned off the CD player and prepared to leave, she left him with one line, not as a nurse, but as someone who once had a broken heart. If you are who I think you are, then I believe you never stopped singing. The world just tried to silence you, and the man smiled for the first time, a smile so faint it could have been missed. But to Zora, it rang louder than any melody. The truth never screams, it whispers, and only those brave enough to listen can see the full picture. Zora got home later than usual. The sky hadn't yet brightened, but her face already glowed. She couldn't sleep, not from exhaustion, but because in her mind, every tiny detail from the past 3 days was falling into place, like a melody beginning to take shape. That voice, no one could fake it. Zora had listened to Jalen Cross's voice hundreds of times, shivering as she watched him perform live on YouTube during the Back from Broken tour. His voice wasn't just technique, it had soul, pain, fire, and she had heard it again last night, right there in room 607. Zora opened her laptop. She typed into Google, Jalen Cross plus accident plus St. Lucia. Countless articles appeared. Jalen Cross missing at sea. No body found. Family holds memorial. Famous singer may have taken his own life after depression. Zora frowned. Took his own life. Or did someone help him disappear? She searched for old photos of Jalen. One image zoomed in on his left wrist, showing a faint tattoo of a handwritten phrase curled around his wrist. Forever 27. Zora shivered. The next morning she returned to her shift. In her pocket was a printed photo, the close-up of Jalen's wrist with that exact tattoo. Room 607 was still quiet. Zora stepped in, this time feeling like an investigator. But she remained herself, gentle, calm, composed. She placed a tray of cotton balls down, pretending to clean. And in that moment, she carefully peeled back a small strip of gauze around his left wrist. There it was, right there. The faded tattoo, slightly blurred from skin graft surgery, but still legible. Forever 27. Zora said nothing. She didn't want to scare him, but she knew. The doubt inside her had turned into certainty. She continued checking the wounds. At his neck, there was a long, clean scar, evidence of a laryngeal surgery. Not a random accident. This was either a surgery to save a voice or to destroy it. Zora remembered rumors from the music industry. Jalen had planned to leave his label and start his own, to support young artists. That made some big names lose their power. And then, the accident happened. No witnesses, no body, only a new contract signed by a Jalen who was no longer alive. That afternoon in the break room, Zora pulled out her phone and typed into the hospital's internal chat group. Does anyone know the name of the first doctor who handled patient 607? A colleague replied after a few minutes. Dr. Grant, but he quit. Rumor is he moved abroad. Zora frowned. Strange. A nameless patient, no records, no family, but treated by a senior doctor who then vanished from the system? That night before leaving room 607, Zora looked at the sleeping man, his face tilted to the left. Under the dim yellow light, she saw the sharp, familiar jawline. It was Jalen. It was him, the man the entire world thought was dead. She sat down, not as a nurse, but as a woman who didn't believe in coincidences. She whispered, I know now. I don't need papers or confirmation. I cried when you stopped singing. Now I know you never really left us. The world just tried to silence you. The man still had his eyes closed, but a single tear slipped from the corner of his eye. The brightest light often comes from flames burning quietly in hell. Zora didn't ask directly. She just sat there, beside the bed, next to a man whose face had once been printed on millions of album covers, but was now just a blurred silhouette wrapped in bandages, surviving in silence. That night, room 607 was eerily quiet. No intercom beeps, no emergency alarms. Only the faint whistle of wind slipping through an unsealed window. Zora brought no music, no soup, only one thing: the silence of acceptance. No pushing, no questioning, and that was what made him speak. "You know now, don't you?" That voice, raspy, weak, but real, cut through the curtain of mystery that had lingered for days. Zora gave a small nod, saying nothing. The man sighed, closed his eyes, and spoke slowly, as if every word was a knife cutting into himself. "My name is Jalen Cross." Even though she had prepared for it, Zora still felt a lump rise in her throat. It was him, the man the whole world mourned, the one declared dead on national television, right here in front of her. I didn't disappear. I was erased by the people who once applauded me, erased by the very industry I poured my soul into. Jalen's voice broke as he recounted it. He had once stood at the top. 3 consecutive record-breaking albums, sold-out world tours, but he didn't rest. He wanted to change things. "I wanted to start my own label, bring poor black kids into the studio, teach them to write music, keep their rights, so they wouldn't be exploited like I was." But that wasn't allowed. Some of the bigger stars, once friendly on camera, saw him as a threat. They told the media Jalen was arrogant, disrespectful to veterans. The label sent lawyers demanding he renew his contract, binding him for 10 more years. He refused. "I thought I was strong, but no one is strong when standing alone among hyenas dressed in fame." Then the accident happened. A private vacation with a few showbiz friends at St. Lucia. The boat caught fire, an unexpected explosion. Only Jalen fell into the sea. He remembered floating, half-conscious, weakened by sleeping pills mixed with alcohol. And then, darkness. A week later, he woke up in a filthy motel room, his throat slashed and barely saved by a nameless doctor. Beside him, a newspaper printed his face. Jalen Cross, a legend gone forever. I was dead, in every legal sense. My assets frozen, music rights transferred with forged documents. I had no name, no rights, no voice. He went into hiding, sought help, was betrayed, chased, nearly died again after eating poisoned food at a volunteer clinic. A nurse saw the scar on his throat and panicked, calling an ambulance. He was brought here. No name, no record. Room 607, where the patients no one wanted were hidden away from the light. Zora was stunned, not because the story was strange, but because every detail matched what she had seen. You weren't just declared dead. You were silenced, while still alive. And I, Zora took a breath, am the only one who knows you're still here. Jalen gave a small, sad laugh. I don't need the whole world to believe. I just need one person not to turn away. Zora said nothing. She gently squeezed his cold hand through her medical glove. I won't leave, not because you're famous, but because I've known what it's like to be made invisible. The dim light in room 607 reflected in Jalen's eyes, and for the first time Zora saw a glow in them, faint but real, like a candle not yet extinguished. The stage blazes, applause thunders, but behind the curtain lie syringes, blood-stained contracts, and screams buried in silence. Zora sat quietly in room 607, one hand holding the vital signs chart, the other resting on her knee. But her mind wasn't there anymore. Jalen, his real name, not a stage name, was recounting every piece of a life the audience had never seen. The life of a singer who survived an industry that wanted him dead. You know Cade T, right? Jalen mentioned a famous rapper, his so-called best friend for 5 years. Zora nodded. He introduced me to Royal Echo, and he was the first to know my vacation schedule in St. Lucia. Next was Mira Lace, an older R&B diva who used to call Jalen her little brother on talk shows. She was the one who poured the drinks that night. That drink is why I wasn't clear-headed enough to swim after the explosion. Zora shuddered. Jalen went on. 3 people, Cade, Mira, and my former manager, Ron Wilkes. They couldn't stand the idea of me starting my own label. I knew too many of their secrets: drugs, money laundering, extortion of new artists. They feared I'd speak up. He had no evidence, no recordings, because everything had been taken in the yacht fire. Laptop melted. Phone vanished. Cloud account hacked within the first week of his disappearance. I woke up with a sewn-up throat and a career that had been exhumed and buried all over again. This time not by the press, but by people who once called me family. Zora exhaled, her eyes red, and the world only saw a headline. Young singer dies in tragic accident. Artists everywhere mourn. Jalen let out a bitter laugh. They grieved beautifully. Someone even dropped a remix tribute album just 2 weeks after I died. Zora frowned. They profited off your death. Exactly, Jalen said. And now, if anyone finds out I'm still alive, they'll do it again. But this time, they won't let me wash up in a hospital. She sat in silence, her mind spinning. This wasn't just a celebrity scandal. It was a systematic conspiracy, driven by money, power, media, and possibly even doctors. Jalen, she whispered, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a journalist. I'm just a nurse. But I won't let them hurt you again. Jalen looked at her, said nothing. But in his eyes was something that hadn't been there in the early days. Trust. She stood up and adjusted his IV line. Starting tomorrow, I'll find a way to recover everything you once had. Old emails, hard drive data, even hospital records. They might have blurred it all, but I won't let you disappear again. Before leaving, Zora said softly, they can turn off the stage lights, but they can't kill your voice, Jalen. And in that fleeting moment, the man the world had written off as dead hummed a fragment of an old chorus, soft, low, raspy, but full of soul. Resurrection doesn't begin with fireworks. It begins with silence, and someone daring to believe that the impossible might still be possible. Zora stayed up all night. Under the dim yellow light of her cramped apartment, she filled 4 pages of her notebook, not with prescriptions, but with a plan to bring back a man the world had declared dead. No one had ever taught her how to do this. There was no manual for a nurse trying to protect a celebrity from attempted murder, but Zora didn't need theory. She had something else. Faith. The next morning, she entered room 607 earlier than usual. Jalen was already sitting up, still thin, still weak, but his eyes had changed, no longer drifting, now focused. I need you to do 3 things, Zora said. 1, trust me. 2, learn how to stand again. 3, don't die. Jalen smiled faintly, hands trembling. You make it sound like boot camp. Number, it's rebirth camp, Zora replied. The plan began. Physical recovery. Zora adjusted his IV schedule, added nutrition through a feeding tube. She introduced light physical therapy, clenching fists, rotating wrists, bending knees. She had a friend secretly bring in muscle supplements and functional foods, things the hospital wouldn't provide for a nameless patient. She taped a small note on the wall of room 607. Day 1, stand for 10 seconds. The next day, day 2, walk 3 steps with a walker. Voice rehabilitation. Jalen had undergone throat surgery, so Zora used speech therapy techniques she had learned while caring for stroke patients. She brought a small harmonica, made him blow into it daily, then came reciting song lyrics, not to sing, but to reconnect with emotion. Music doesn't just come from the vocal cords, she said. It comes from everything you've survived. Evidence recovery. Zora took action. She bought a used laptop, installed a new hard drive. She contacted Trevor, an IT technician she had once saved 2 years ago. I need to recover data from a hacked cloud account. Whose? Someone the world thinks is dead. Trevor looked at her like she was pitching a sci-fi film, but nodded. You saved my life. Now it's my turn to save someone else. Meanwhile, Zora quietly pulled data from hospital records. She printed Jalen's blood test results, cross-referenced them with his public medical history, blood type, genetic markers, underlying conditions. Everything matched. Undeniable. Find a witness. Zora remembered one name Jalen had mentioned. The only person I trusted back then was a sound engineer named Luis. She searched social media, found Luis living in rural Texas, working as an HVAC repairman. His account was mostly inactive, but one post stood out, dated right after Jalen's death. Some voices never die. They're just turned down so low no one dares to listen. Zora messaged him, "Luis, Jalen is alive. I need you." No immediate reply, but a few days later an email arrived. Address? I'm coming. Prepare for exposure. Zora borrowed a small camera. She began documenting Jalen's recovery. Never his face, only his hands, shaking as they wrote his name again, Jalen Cross. She recorded his voice, every word, every cough, every early attempt at a chorus. "I don't want to be famous again," Jalen said. "I just want my voice back. Mine. And for those who've had theirs silenced." Zora smiled. "Then we'll show them. Light can come from darkness too." And so, the plan began. From a tiny room, from a man declared legally dead, from a nurse nobody noticed. Sometimes, staying alive isn't about breathing. It's about refusing to let yourself be extinguished. Zora sensed it, before it even happened. That night's shift was unusually quiet. No emergency pages, no co-workers casually dropping by room 607 with their usual whispers. Even the coffee machine had stopped working. Too quiet, and silence was always the sign of an approaching storm. 10:17 p.m. Zora was checking Jalen's IV line when the door creaked open. A new face. A brown-haired male nurse she'd never seen on any shift before. His eyes didn't look at the chart. They stared straight at Jalen. I was assigned to assist with this patient," he said. Zora felt a chill down her spine. "Are you sure you've got the right room?" "This one isn't listed in the system," she said slowly, fingers already slipping into her lab coat pocket for her personal key. The man gave a slight smile, nodded, then backed out. But Zora knew that wasn't the end. 11:02 p.m. Zora locked the door of room 607 from the inside. She turned to Jalen, her gaze sharp. "We're leaving, tonight." The escape plan. She had 45 minutes before the shift change. Zora moved quickly, acting like she was on routine duty. She grabbed an empty hospital bed, covered it with linens like she was prepping for a transfer. She went to the laundry room, snuck a caregiver's uniform, mask, and head cover. She returned to room 607, helped Jalen change into the uniform, rewrapped his head in gauze, not to cover wounds this time, but to hide his identity. "Can you walk?" "If you push, I'll survive," Jalen whispered with a faint smile. 11:57 p.m. The door opened. Jalen lay on the hospital bed, pretending to be unconscious. Zora wheeled the bed out, her hands trembling slightly but her eyes calm and firm. First security checkpoint. A guard looked up. "Where you headed?" "Emergency neuroconsult. Patients showing signs of mild seizures," Zora replied, flashing a fake transfer form. She had printed it days ago from the records room, just in case. The guard frowned, reaching for his radio. Zora held her breath. At that exact moment, a doctor ran by shouting, "Why are you still sitting there? They're coding on 4." The guard, startled, stood up and ran off. Zora pushed the bed into the elevator, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. 12:03 a.m. Elevator to the basement, the west side exit of the hospital. Beyond it was an emergency door leading to the service lot. Zora sent a quick message from a cheap burner phone she'd bought separately. "Ready?" The text went to Trevor, waiting outside in an old ambulance van. "Waiting, west side, white van." 12:08 a.m. Emergency door swung open. Zora pushed the bed through the concrete hallway. The night wind bit with cold, but she felt nothing, only the fear of being caught. Suddenly, a shout behind them. "Stop! Who are you taking?" It was the brown-haired nurse. Behind him, a man in a security uniform. with no name badge. They had caught up. Zora didn't stop. "Emergency transfer! You're interfering with hospital protocol!" she shouted back, not waiting for a response. She sprinted. The white van's engine was already running. Trevor flung open the rear doors. Zora shoved Jalen inside and slammed them shut. They sped off into the night. Headlights chased them for a few seconds, then vanished around the bend. 12:21 a.m. inside the van. Jalen lay gasping for air. Zora slumped to the floor, drenched in sweat. She grabbed his hand. "We just bet our futures on this," Jalen whispered through ragged breaths. "No, you just saved my life. Again." Justice doesn't arrive through prayer. It arrives when someone steps forward and says, "I'm still alive." 3 weeks after the escape, a small house on the city's outskirts, where Jalen and Zora were hiding, was silent. No music, no traffic, only the sound of keyboard taps and hushed voices between two people preparing to ignite a revolution with the truth. Jalen was stronger. He could walk without a frame, speak full sentences without breaking. His voice was still raw, but the emotion was intact. And Zora, no longer just a nurse, was now the driving force behind one of the most daring exposures in music history. They had reached Luis, the sound technician from back then, the one who'd controlled the recording systems during rehearsals and internal meetings at Royal Echo. Luis didn't say much. He simply sent an email with an attachment nearly 2 gigabytes in size. "I can't keep this anymore. This is the last copy. I hope you survive." Inside were audio recordings of meetings where 3 major stars discussed how to make sure Jalen is no longer a problem. A clip of Jalen shouting in a meeting, "I'm not selling my voice. I won't sign a contract that chokes new artists." A forged contract with a fake signature under the name of Jalen Cross. Zora sent all the data to Elena Cruz, an independent journalist once threatened by Royal Echo for exposing exploitation in the industry. "I have something that could change the music world," Zora messaged. And then, the day came. Live broadcast, the show Truth Sessions. A nationally aired talk show renowned for uncovering major scandals. Elena introduced 3 anonymous guests. The first 2 were a lawyer and a journalist. The third one introduced with a single line, "The man the music industry declared dead." The camera shifted, the lights dimmed, a silhouette walked onto the stage. He was thin. A faint scar marked his neck. He wore sunglasses. But the moment he spoke, "My name is Jalen Cross. I never died. I was murdered." On paper, the entire studio went silent. The host's mouth dropped. Audience members wept, clutching each other's hands. "I'm not here to reclaim fame. I'm here to show young artists that they have the right to live, to create, and to refuse to sell their soul for a contract." Elena played the recording. Cade T and Mira Lace's voices rang out clearly. "He's getting reckless. Let him die. I've got someone who can wipe the files. If he launches a label, we lose control." Twitter exploded. YouTube's live stream hit 2 million views in under 15 minutes. The hashtag number Jalen Lives reached global trending, #1 in less than an hour. Backstage, Zora stood quietly, her hand on Jalen's microphone before he went on. She didn't need to be on screen, because the real victory belonged to the truth. After the show, reporters, producers, and major networks lined up for interviews. Jalen said only one thing, "I'll only speak if Zora's sitting next to me." Zora stepped out in her old white nurse's coat. No makeup, no stage lights. But when she sat beside him, millions saw it clearly. This was the woman who kept a man alive when the whole world wanted to bury him. Not everyone who comes back to life knows what to do with it, but some, after escaping death, choose only one thing: to live in a way worthy of the one who saved them. 3 months after the broadcast, Royal Echo was under major investigation. Cade T and Mira Lace were temporarily stepping away from the spotlight to cooperate with authorities. Dozens of young artists pulled out from the label. A quiet revolution was unfolding in the music industry. As for Jalen Cross, he didn't release a new single, didn't agree to exclusive interviews, didn't sign with any record label again. He chose another path. A small studio opened on the south side of the city, named 607 Collective. Not a coincidence. Here, artists of color, queer artists, unknown, struggling talents, could record for free during their first 30 days. No binding contracts, no pressure to create a hit. Just music, pure, honest, alive. Jalen sat in the studio every Wednesday afternoon. He no longer performed on stage, but he sang with them, adjusted their beats, taught them how to write from real pain. "I didn't come back to be famous," he said. "I came back to return the light to those who had it stolen, just like me." And Zora? She didn't accept any offers for TV consulting, didn't write a book, didn't take money for saving a life. She returned to the hospital. The break room was still tiny, her uniform still wrinkled, her salary still low. But now every step she took through the hallways was proof that kindness could spark miracles. One late afternoon at the end of winter, under a sky softly tinted with fading sunlight, Zora walked past the 607 studio. The door was slightly open, and inside came a raw voice. A young girl singing, shaky and offbeat, but real. Zora smiled and stepped in. Jalen was sitting there, back turned, clapping along to the girl's rhythm. When he saw Zora, he didn't turn fully. He didn't need to. He just said, "You're late. I thought you had the night shift." "I took time off to hear the first song from the first artist at 607, she replied. They both smiled. Nothing more needed to be said. A few minutes later, the young girl came out of the recording booth, eyes glistening. "Thank you for letting me be heard." Zora watched her as if seeing herself, a person once considered voiceless. She sat beside Jalen, looking out the window, where the sunset painted the sky in warm amber. "You know," she said, "a lot of people still believe you shouldn't be alive." Jalen gazed into the distance. "Yeah, but as long as one person believes I should be, that's enough." And it truly was. This story didn't need a grand finale. No fireworks, no billboard comeback, just a world where truth is allowed to exist. Just a life where kindness isn't mistaken for foolishness. Just a room where a voice is not killed before it's sung. That day, Jalen Cross came back to life. Not as a star, but as a human. And Zora? She was still a nurse, still walking those steady steps down long hallways. But every time she passed room 607, she smiled. Because she knew someone had stepped out of the darkness, and the light had started right where it was darkest. If you were Zora, would you dare to save someone the world believes is already dead? Comment your answer below. Thank you for staying with this story. See you in the next one, where light always begins with courage.